Welcome back, everybody, to the Remix Morning Show here at Black Power Media. Good morning.
What's happening?
And greetings to Filmon Zerai. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. I've only unfortunately been reading your name.
Oh, no problem. I really appreciate being on the show. It's really a privilege and honor.
Welcome. So, first of all, thank you, Filmon, because of the fact that we know that behind the scenes, you've been one of our heavy supporters, especially in the world of Twitter, clipping videos on your own and reposting, retweeting. This is what a supporter is about right here. The man decides that, he likes some shit. He ain't waiting for us to clip it. He just said, I'm going to clip it, and it's going to be up there. So shout out to Filmon.
That's being proactive.
That's right. And had the nerve to come back to us and say, I hope you don't mind. He was like, I hope this is okay.
Well, that's just being polite.
That's the way to do it, too. Always ask forgiveness, never permit.
Thank you for getting my good side.
Right.
I'm like, it's great. No, anyway, we certainly appreciate it.
And the fact that you're doing that while you are also working on writing about so many important issues in the world, particularly what's happening in terms of Ethiopia. So special shout out to you, brother. Thank you for coming on.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, to be honest, like the work you guys do collectively is really important. It's unique. We need this, organized media outlet as a counter to, democracy now. And this is an important endeavor. And I share it. I share it with many friends, and they're tuning in morning. I know it doesn't seem like you guys don't get that much props, but trust me, people are watching. So really appreciate the work you guys are doing.
No doubt. Appreciate you.
Thank you
very much. Appreciate
and let me just add, that is a very great radio voice. Just saying. I'm just saying.
No, it's the mic. Don't let it fool you. It's the mic. It's the mic.
Let's give him an opportunity to use it. So let's talk a little bit about, we have you here because there's so much happening in Ethiopia, right?
Yes.
And the way Jared brought it up to us, which is a great frame, was in particular the way in which Western media and the U.S. government is portraying the struggle that's happening in Ethiopia. And the way that it's being spoon-fed to Western audiences is that the Ethiopian government is committing mass human rights abuses against a minority population. And therefore, the Ethiopian government should be ostracized. There should be sanctions put on. The other side should be supported. This is the narrative that we've been getting in Western media. So we know that things that are happening on the ground are a little different than that. So we wanted you to come on and talk a little bit about what compared to what we're being told, what's really happening on the ground in Ethiopia right now.
Yeah, I mean, like the article, the Black Agenda report, pretty much is focused on how the left covers the Ethiopia. Obviously the Western media is following the directive of State Department, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty. These are the set narrative, and they have to follow these directive, and it's expected. We see it in Zimbabwe, we see it in Burundi, we see it elsewhere. So I think the article itself, let's just make it clear: the biggest threat to the region's stability is the TPLF. It is Washington backed. There's many evidence and archive documents to prove that. The WikiLeaks, all types of evidence, and there's many coverage on that. So the left, in its effort to cover Ethiopia the last few months, got it right, focusing on the TPLF. What they got wrong is that they just jumped to this narrative about Abiy that is really presenting him or framing him as a person that is reformer or somebody that is fully has legitimacy, and there's no other struggles inside Ethiopia that is not being covered. So outside of the TPLF, I think that's correct. Focusing on the primary contradiction, which is imperialism. The other issue is there is an long ongoing ideological struggle between the different various nationalities in Ethiopia as far as the theories about the national question. This is a long struggle from the 1960s, 70s with the Ethiopian revolutionaries and Eritrean revolutionaries. They pulled in the Lenin's and Stalin's view on the national question, because a lot of people have a a few, pretty much this grand idea of Ethiopia as one unified country with one language, Christian, it exists for 3,000 years. These are mythology, but Ethiopia is actually the first neo-colonial state. I really recommend for the audience to read The Invention of Ethiopia. It's really a great, pretty much to uncover the mythology and then look at it from a scientific view. So the creation of Ethiopia and the invention of it has all these nationalities inside Ethiopia. They were conquered, colonized by the Abyssinian ruling class from the north, by weapons handed by the Europeans to conquer and colonize all the nations in the south. One of the largest nationalities was the Oromos and Oromia. That's the largest nationalities. There are 40 million. So that narrative is missing from left coverage and understanding the historical ideological struggle on the national question. How do the marginalized communities feel? The topic of the TPLF and the heavy-handedness of Washington has caused the left to become overly one-sided ideologically and alienate the oppressed nationalities. The Oromos are not at this no more protest. They're not even active on the social media because they're really there's a sense of rage to what's happening inside Oromia. Right now, inside Oromia, you have the arrest of the Oromo leaders, political leaders from the OLF, the Oromo Liberation Front, the OFC. Johar Mohammed is arrested, Bekele is arrested, and OLF is like they were neutralized. But the left abandoned that narrative of why is that happening. So it gets really complicated when you leave the issue of the TPLF, which is the aggressor and is causing the war, but it becomes more challenging for the left. It becomes very uncomfortable because they're giving it one set narrative about Ethiopia being 3,000 years old. The Battle of Ottawa is a symbol.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that actually, that particular point, because even before coming into any sort of political consciousness as a youngster, musically through reggae and other form, we've been hearing about the Battle of Adawa for a long time. And then when you wrote about its romanticization, whatever that word is, in your Black Agenda piece, I was hoping you could quickly elaborate on that particular point, if you would, because I feel like, anyway.
Yeah.
How is that romanticized and how does that fit in with what you're saying here?
I mean, before I start, I just recognize that within the Black diaspora, during that time from the late 1800s, there was a need for, symbolism out in the world against white supremacy. And the Battle of Ottawa came at a time where that was most needed, and Marcus Garvey and the earlier pioneer anti-colonial forces, gravitate toward that. At the same time, we saw W. Du Bois gravitate toward the Japanese. The Japanese defeated the Russians. They saw that as a way to symbolize, defeat of white supremacy. So these incidents of the Battle of Ottawa and the feudal Japanese, but the backstory is we saw the Japanese become an imperialist. They, conquered the Koreans and they were racist toward the other Asians. They subjugate and colonize other nations. Same thing with the Battle of Ottawa. The Battle of Ottawa, for some people, the romantic narrative is that, yes, there was a defeat of the Italians, but how did the Italians get there? The British and the French were the competing powers in the Horn of Africa, not the Italians. The Italians were secondary powers. The British convinced the Italians to move to the Horn of Africa as a way to check the French influence, counter them as a balance. The French were based in Djibouti. They were making an effort to expand. So this was an intense competition between the French and the British. So the British were supporting the Italians, and the French were supporting Menelik at that time. So the Battle of Ottawa is actually a proxy war between two competing power, and Menelik was, supported by the French. So this symbolism that, in the Black diaspora that people have about the Battle of Ottawa is actually used to legitimize what Menelik, he used these weapons to further consolidate his power and then conquer, the Oromos, all these nations that you never heard of, conquer them and create these things called Ethiopia. A lot of people have this view that Ethiopia, the word Ethiopia in the Bible and what we have in the modern state is Ethiopia, but that's not the case. So the Battle of Ottawa actually legitimized the conquest of nations and nationalities, consider late his power. And you call, the thing that we call Ethiopia has led to the creation of it. But the Europeans play a heavy hand. They gave him weapons. In addition to that, they supported his slave. Menelik was one of the biggest slave entrepreneurs. He made millions capturing slaves. They helped, support that. In addition to that, they built trains in the 1900 so that they can loot the resources from the conquered nations that he, was going in the south. So the Battle of Adawa itself becomes very uncomfortable for the Pan African circle, the Black diaspora circle, just everywhere because it challenges you to, question things that you heard romantically. As somebody, as people here who are Marxist or scientific socialist, we must not have romantic idea of or mythology. We must be critical. We must have materialist line. So when it comes to Ethiopia, when it comes to Israel, when it comes to America, we must not believe in mythology. We must understand the indigenous population, their narrative, the oppressed nationalities in each area. So when it comes to Ethiopia, hear the Oromos. Why do they feel this way? Who are they? What is their story? How do they come? If you believe Ethiopia is this 3,000-year-old country, how come they have this various nationalities? So the Battle of Ottawa really challenges the left.
Yeah, Philmon, thanks so much for that history because that was so deep and so great, and we really needed to hear that this is not a subject that we should be wading into from a anti-TPLF or pro-Abiy kind of perspective, but a lot of people do. And I think this is a good example of why we do say in the Black Alliance for Peace, and in HOA PALS, I believe that we are not ideologically committed to any political party, any political personality, but we are committed to anti-imperialism and the right of peoples for their own self-determination. Like whatever tensions there are among the people of Ethiopia, it is not the right or purview or responsibility of the United States government to be anywhere near the people in Ethiopia in working out their conflicts. Now, but I'm wondering, what does that look like for us when we are anti-imperialist, but we're also Pan-Africanists, some of us, right? And we do want connections with people on the continent, and we're looking at these different groups of people who are struggling in Ethiopia, and we don't know, well, how do we engage in being Pan-Africanists and be in solidarity with people in Ethiopia, but also being careful not to be like picking political sides?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the Black Alliance for Peace statement regarding the latest protests with the No More. The No More has a lot of baggage. The organizers mostly are liberals. There's an issue there of who they are ideologically, but Black Alliance for Peace and their statement was great stamp of not being not aligned, but at the same time just focusing on the primary contradiction, non-intervention against imperialism. So this applies to Zimbabwe. It applies to Burundi. The same case that it should be, the same case everywhere else. For example, Burundi in 2016, there was efforts to intervene there, cause sanctions and destabilize the state. Internally, the leaders were very conservative and reactionary, but as a principal anti-imperialist, we just are choosing to not be against the non-intervention, against imperialist aims. We don't agree with their conservative views. We don't agree with their reactionary views internally, but hey, we're all African states. There should not be intervention. The people, the masses have a right, they will have to struggle with their reactionary locally. We must respect the agency of the people on the ground to fight and have a revolution on their own term without non-intervention. So I really appreciate the Black Alliance for Peace for making that statement, which is, it was not align with the pro-Abiy voice or trying to frame Abiy as some type of anti-imperialist entity. But I really appreciate focusing. I think that's the best way to do it. Just focus on the main contradiction, imperialism. So in this case, there was no focus on Abiy, calling him he's the greatest. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winning. He's democratically elected. He's a reformer. No, we don't need to hear that. We don't need to hear that. We just focus on the TPLF. How's Washington roll? Beyond that, you're gonna anger or you're gonna enrage the Oromos and the other people who are really not feeling Abiy when you just are siding with him too much. But that's just one way.
What has been your been the response to the article, from Ethiopians? And if you haven't gotten a response, what would you expect the response to be based on what you're talking about with the Battle of Adawa in particular?
I mean, there are within the Ethiopian community, there are sensible elements, from the Amhara region who are revolutionaries or principle who are will be aligned to this idea and critique of the Battle of Adawa. Now, the intention of this article is not to stop the momentum against the PLF or the everybody unifying on a one-track lane, but is more to be careful about the how the left comes into the situation and give more power to more power to one side ideologically and normalize the view that the marginalized communities are a bunch of tribalists, ethno-fascists. These are words that are very violent to dismiss and demonize the oppressed nationalities, but they are principal Ethiopians who are willing to hear the criticism of the issue of the state. How can we move forward, and how can we move forward within a socialist realm? That's a word that is will get a lot of people uncomfortable within the no more campaign. The idea of socialism, there's the rhetoric about anti-imperialism, but if you really dig deep, ask them about how can we implement Pan-Africanism. If you really push them to that level, they're gonna be like, "Oh, we're not really down with socialism. We want to try this thing, Abby's doing, the privatization of the telecom or pushing neoliberalism." No, we're not about that. If we oppose Obama as a neoliberal, we must be conscious of Abby being a neoliberal. But I don't want people to think this is an effort. It's the same way as during the Libya invasion and targeting of Gaddafi, there was voices who were siding with the quote unquote revolutionaries or trying to do both sides of them. No, no, no. In this case, the TPLF is the bigger evil. And in the same case they did with Syria, where they were focusing on Assad, working with the CIA. Or no, we're not doing that. That's not the emphasis here. We're just trying to be careful how the left navigates around the ideological struggle that's been ongoing for years and being one-sided and causing people to be enraged and further push them towards supporting the other reactionary forces.
I'm clear on obviously obviously we need to be anti-imperialist. And I'm curious about, because there are so many nationalities, ethnic groups that make up what we call Ethiopia. And there's been struggles, and at one point there was a socialist government, and some would say that socialist government, let's say, did not implement socialism in the best way. And then it was overthrown by what I guess what is considered a TPLF in terms of like that particular ethnic group who, and you tell me if I'm getting this history correct, who kind of installed some or brought out some of the ethnic contradictions more as a way to organize the country in terms of different regions having sort of certain amount of control, but try to, which some people say was good, and others suggest that it also led to some of the ethnic strife that we see coming out more today than ever has, or at least in recent Ethiopian history. Again, not necessarily trying to choose sides, but let's say if there wasn't the imperialists there, and then these internal contradictions were coming to fore. I'm just curious about your political point of view on, as somebody who knows the region well, obviously from the region. Is there a sense that Ethiopia potentially should be broken up because of how it was brought together in the first place? What are some of the conversations on the ground, in addition to socialism, but what are some of the conversations on the ground around what should be a logical structure without the imperialists around the region or the land mass that we know as Ethiopia?
That's a good question. I mean, before I start, I really want to emphasize that the Derg regime under Mengistu Haile Mariam, there's a perception that he was socialist or Marxist, even the phraseology he used. Um, he was Western trained. He was trained in, I think, Kansas. There's a connection to him, Western intelligent. His rise came at a time where the real Ethiopian revolutionaries were making an effort to solve this national question. When he got into power, the military junta, they liquidated the Ethiopian revolutionaries and Eritrean revolutionaries as well. The Marxist elements who were trying to tackle this contradiction. So the time of the rise of the Derg is really itself a problem because it damages the perception about Marxism or Pan-Africanism or revolutionary Pan-Africanism or even the word communism within the Ethiopian and Eritrean circles. That he did a good job to neutralize the socialist elements in the region. It left a bad, it's just a negative connotation with communism, socialism in the region because of the Derg, and so that's the point. But regarding the TPLF, they pose themselves as the vanguard of the oppressed nationalities. That's not true. They took power. They continue in the same way the Abiy is continuing, his conquest to be that center. That was the power struggle. They got to power in 1991 with the assistance of the EPLF inside Addis Ababa. From 1991 to 94, they created this constitution that guaranteed multinational federalism, not ethnic federalism, multinational federalism, because ethnic federalism itself is a Abyssinian slur to demonize the oppressed nationalities. But there was an effort, as the Constitution, being, because of the pressure of the Oromos and the OLF, various nationalities to, push toward a regional autonomy or a governance that will recognize their land, their governance, and their political system. So the original constitution and name, multinational federalism, was not implemented under the TPLF regime. It poses that they are creator of this multinational federalism, but it's not. It never gave the Oromos their regional autonomy. They control their parties. So it was posing as a multinational federalism, but it was still in the center, controlling all the regions. So it was a centralized state pretending to be a multinational federal state. So that's the biggest problem with the TPLF. It abandoned, it betrayed, and it stole the oppressed nationalities narrative of needing a multinational federalism to be in the power on the center in Addis Ababa. So that's what they've been in power for 28 years, claiming to be on the side of the oppressed nationalities, but they betrayed the Oromos, they betrayed the Sidami, they betrayed the Somalis. It abandoned, it betrayed, and it stole the oppressed
Care. Peace, my man.
Beautiful.